Hey! I am very hyper because this is one of my favorite videos of all time to film, because at the end of every year, we become so rich in data. Everyone posts their best books of the year and we get a full year's worth of research, and then booktubers, book talkers, bookstagrammers, and your aunt post their reviews, and then I get to pick some of those and read them, and they're more likely to be really great books because lots of people who I trust and have similar book taste to think so. So the first book that I saw quite a few times that I have not read yet is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Follett. This is one of my only books, I think, where the text is printed onto the hardcover itself. I believe this falls under the category of cozy fantasy, which I don't have a great history with because the face of cozy fantasy in 2022, I think, was this book here, Legends and Lattes. I got 70 pages into this and I realized the reason I like fantasy is because it's high stakes, and cozy fantasy is the complete opposite of that. So that is the only thing working against this novel for me, but we'll see if I like it. This book seems to have every other attribute that I typically love in books. We've got two nerdy main characters, we have fairies, and we've got some banter. I'm very excited. Let's give this one a try, shall we? First sentence of the book, and this is so cozy. And it is January, but it just got cold in Texas, so this is actually perfect right now. I'm very excited about this. Good morning, guys. It is 5:30 a.m. I woke up at 4 to take Ryan to the airport, got back home, and decided it's an early start to the day. So I'm gonna continue Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And because this book gives such a cozy vibe, I feel like reading it in the early hours of the morning is just very fitting. We've got my little lamp over there. So let's get it. This is the type of book that you just want to read slow because every word is chosen so carefully, it feels like. It's so cozy. So far, the opening of the book, you're following Emily Wilde. She has her dog, she got on a ship, and she's on her way to some sort of Scandinavian country, to a small little house on the hill that kind of reminds me of what the Hobbit's house would be like. And she's kind of socially awkward, but all she really cares about is studying these fairies, which you will not find in the city. You have to go to one of these faraway countryside places. And I really like the writing of this book, and it makes so much sense that I had tried to pick up this book, I think last year, but on audio, and I think the way that it's written is much better read because it's writing that I really enjoy reading with my own eyes, but listening to it, I couldn't really follow what was going on because I feel like the language is not natural speech type language. Its effect is better read. So this is going way better, and I feel like I potentially will really like this book, so I'm very excited. This writing is making me get my pens out. This is a great sign. Oh, please come closer. I'm pretty sure this book only has a subplot of romance, but I'm pretty sure that dude just came on the scene. 50 pages in, we've only read one letter from this guy, and it seems like they're a little bit of academic rivals. Not necessarily enemies, but a little bit of dislike for each other going on for sure. And so far, this book is doing two things that I love. Number one, the way that she describes the weather. She gives it human-like qualities. There is a literary term for this that is escaping memory right now. Personification. Awesome. For example, the moment I poked my foot free, I yanked it back. The cold had claws. I mean, it's not like a single moment that makes it really cool. It's kind of the accumulation of every time weather comes into play, which it does a lot because she's somewhere very cold. Winter isn't here yet. It's just clearing its throat. And the second thing it's doing that I love is every time the love interest does something that is supposed to make us fall in love with him, the language to describe it is with disdain or hatred when it's clearly the opposite. For example, he gave the girl who helped him a smile so thoughtlessly beautiful that she seemed momentarily incapable of movement, before turning his amused black eyes upon me again. That one's not very hateful. Let me find another one. I did find myself smirking a little as he rambled on. It is hard not to be entertained by Bamblebee. It is one of the things I resent most about him. No, you don't. You love it, but you hate it. That's great. That's something that the Cruel Prince trilogy does so much, and that is one of my favorite romances of all time, and that is not a romance book. It's fully a subplot, but I don't care. When it is on the page, it's my favorite thing ever. This is still going well.
Yes, Lydia said, and I understood then that they were afraid of Wilde, very much so, and eager to avoid offending.
Good morning, guys. I finished Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and it was spectacular. Do I understand why this made it into tons of people's favorite books of the year? Yes. Would it make it into mine? Unfortunately, no, which is shocking because the good parts of this book were brilliant, amazing, spectacular. And the good parts being the atmosphere, the coziness, the banter between the two characters was some of the best that I've ever seen. The declaration of love was, I feel like, in a format that I've never seen before. And I don't want to really necessarily say what it is, obviously, because that's a really fun part of the book, but I was like, oh, that's a very unique choice that the author made, and I feel like it worked so well, and I loved it, and it made sense so much for their personalities. Like, I feel like it was just very realistic to how the characters have been acting the entire time in the book, and then how they acted when they were finally admitting feelings to each other. Whereas I feel like some books, a character will be like anxious or worried about people's opinions of them, and then suddenly it's like a declaration of love, and they're the most confident human being in the entire world. Their personality went out the window and it makes no sense for them. So that was amazing, but it is a subplot of romance, and so the majority of the book, you're following Emily Wilde while she's on this island trying to research the fairies, and she's getting caught up in all of the folklore, and then it turns out that some of the people in the village have been taken by the fairies, and she's trying to help them out, get people's children back, figure out why the fairies are taking mortal human beings, and all of that stuff. I feel like the character development could have been better, maybe. I don't even really know what it is, but when it came to the actual plot, I found myself getting kind of bored, and I just wanted to see the two love interests like talk to each other more. But this definitely solidified that I love mythical creatures in books and fairy landscapes, because if you liked the Cruel Prince trilogy, I think you'll definitely like this book, because even the romance is a little bit like I hate you vibes. So overall, 4 stars, amazing book. I think it totally deserves to be on people's list because the writing also was amazing, and I'll probably think about the characters' banter but not really the plot. But there's a second book that came out this year, so maybe if I read that one, my opinion could change. But let's start the next book. I'm also amped to read it. I've been hearing about it for many, many months. Is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I actually started it yesterday and I almost got to page 200. This book was super easy to fly through, and in last year's video when I read the most viral books of 2022, I read one of her books, which was Babel, and these are 2 very different books. This one was like a historical fantasy, super intense plot, lots of history, and she tries to use the fantasy elements to talk about colonization. And then in this book, I didn't read this one for the longest time because I low-key thought it was nonfiction. It's not, but a lot of people say that R.F. Kuang inserts herself into the story a lot, which who can really know if that's true, but it is funny because the plot of this book is that we're following this white author who is friends with this girl named Athena, and Athena is an Asian author who pretty much right out of college gets a huge 6-figure book deal and starts getting awards out the wazoo, and she's just very successful pretty much. But super early on in the book, it's not a spoiler, Athena dies in a random tragic accident, and June, the white author that we're following, sees her manuscript just lying on the desk and is like, you know what? It would be a disservice to Athena if I didn't take this unfinished manuscript, edit it up myself, fill in all the plot holes with my writing, and then I publish it. So that's what happens, and then you're just following this character. But it's funny because the manuscript in this book is like a super heavy historical book about World War I and the Chinese laborers in World War I who are often forgotten. And if you've read Babel, they're definitely not the same, obviously, but this one is very heavy on the history. I can see why people have thought like, oh, like is this like a R.F. Kuang's kind of writing about herself but in a fiction way, which I almost feel like the more an author self-inserts, the better the book will probably be, because if they're writing from first-hand experience, they probably have tons to write about, and it'll be the most accurate thing they could ever write from their own emotional experience. And I say this because Beach Read by Emily Henry is my absolute favorite book that she's ever written, and I've watched so many interviews with her, and she talks about how this book was never supposed to be released. She just was taking a break from writing the young adult sci-fi that she was, and she was kind of using this book to get some personal emotions out. And she says it feels like she bared her own soul into this book. And when I read it, I feel like I can tell. And when I read her other books, I feel like I can tell that they're still amazing, I love them, but they're not her personal experience. So I'm all for if this is actually R.F. Kuang's personal experience. I think it's so fast-paced so far. Obviously, the main character that you're following in this book is supposed to be super unlikable, but it's such an addicting read because you're just watching a car crash and you just can't take your eyes away. That's kind of a horrible saying. So I'm gonna hop back into it and see what I think. Good thing I have my workout clothes on because after finishing this book and reading all the reviews, I feel like I just ran a marathon. Actually though, I feel drained after reading. I went down a spiral of reading 5-star reviews and really bad reviews of this book, which in and of itself is a little bit meta because a lot of the book follows Twitter discourses about books, who's allowed to tell what story, lots of themes like that. And I feel like most of the negative reviews I saw was talking about the thing that I was talking about earlier, where they feel like R.F. Kuang was just using this book to defend herself against some of the criticisms, but through the lens of these characters, which I don't follow authors closely enough. I also don't own Twitter, so I have no idea what they're talking about, to be honest. Like, I've read this book by her, and then there are only a few authors who I've really like watched interviews of them and learned about their lives. But yeah, so I feel like the people who know like everything that went behind this book and her personal life had a lot more to say about it. But as someone who didn't really know any of that going into it, it pretty much read like a fiction book with more mystery thriller aspects to it. So it was super fast paced. I read it in like a day and a half and I really wanted to get to the end to figure out how it was going to conclude and what was going to happen. I feel like because so many of R.F. Kuang's books have commentary on a certain subject, then all of her reviews tend to be like on one side or the other of the commentary that she's making. And like I said, because I don't know all the ins and outs of this author's career, I wasn't really reading into like, what is she saying about this? Does this mean it's from her real life? Blah, blah. Like, I had none of that context. So this book did elicit a lot of reaction. I feel like multiple times throughout reading the book, I feel like I was making this face. Like, the things that were happening were so shocking that I would just like scrunch my face up like this, and then I would realize after and I'd be like, oh, I need to relax my eyebrows. And I was flipping through the pages trying to get to the end. So that was also really fun, and I think overall I'd give this book 4 stars. So again, pretty good. Also wouldn't make my favorites list of the year, but it seems like this author consistently makes it into these videos of mine, so she's definitely someone I'll keep on my radar. 2 books down, both 4 stars, both very enjoyable times. It's Sunday. I just got back from church and socializing, and I made myself a second cappuccino, and I'm ready to sit on the couch for the rest of the day and finish a book. I started this series in this video on my vlog channel, and that is the Crescent City series. And then in the video I had started the second book and I hadn't finished it, and this book has been taking me so long to get through, but the third one comes out January 30th, 2024. So I feel like I saw a good amount of people reading the first and second book in 2023 so that they could become a part of the entire gaggle of people who are going to be posting about it. And I also was gonna have FOMO if I wasn't in the know with everything. This second book has the craziest reactions to the end of it that I've ever seen. And unfortunately, it was spoiled for me, which could have potentially been like one of the craziest experiences when reading books that I could have had. And I'm hoping that it's still like a crazy reveal because I don't necessarily know how it happens. I just know what it is. So I'm about to get to the end. I'm very, very, very excited. And let's see if it's just as cool as everyone else's reactions. I'm so nervous. 3 weeks later, finished the book. That ending, I knew it was coming. I had no idea it would be literally the last line of the book. I'm wearing a backwards hat in reference to one of the characters in this series. I've officially read these 2 800-page books. I liked the first one better than the second one, even though the last line of this book is insane. But I just don't feel that attached to the characters in this series in comparison to the Throne of Glass series and Akatar series. But they were still fun, obviously, and now with the setup of what this last line in this book did, I'm stoked for the third book to come out because that's actually gonna be insane. But I'm giving this one 4 stars. This one was also 4 stars, but I enjoyed it more. Yeah, the ending is insane. Why someone would screenshot it and put it on a TikTok that has no spoiler warning, I don't know. But yeah, definitely read this series before you read that series. But now I have one of the more popular series under my belt. That was crazy. That was a crazy time. That was good. That was good. That was a good book. Yep, pretty good. Next book I'm gonna be reading, that was kind of loud. It's kind of good. Oh. Okay, anyways, The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I saved this one for last because I have a little suspicion that it'll be my favorite because magical realism and literary fiction and a fun game. It kind of reminds me of the plot of Ready Player One, where someone creates a game and then people are trying to solve it. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the vibe yet, but I'm gonna start it and then let you know what the vibe actually is. I have too much energy. Been in the middle of an allergy attack for a day and a half now, and it feels like my head is submerged in water. And yeah, nope, it's not submerged in water. It's kind of like I'm wearing noise canceling headphones already, which I guess you could consider a superpower. But I got 50 pages into this book and it is really charming so far. I'm already rooting very hard for a character who is a teacher's aide, but she's pretty young. She's like 26, I think. And there's this little boy in her class named Christopher, and he's being fostered by a family that has 2 other sick babies, so he doesn't get much attention. And this teacher aide, Lucy, wants to adopt him so bad, but she doesn't have the finances in order to do so. And then we have another point of view of a guy who lives on this weird, mysterious island where the author of this very popular book series lives, but he hasn't picked up his pen or typewriter or anything to write a new book in the series in so long. Finally, one day he does, but he only writes 1 copy of it. And he creates this riddle that people have to solve in order to get to the next step. I'm assuming it's gonna be multiple steps before you get to read the book, but that's where I'm at right now. This book was so good. We're on day 4 of allergies now, okay? So I'm sounding a little different. This was amazing. This book, I feel like you can just recommend to anyone. There are actually a few things that are pretty dark, which is interesting because it's such a whimsical and wholesome and just heartwarming book. And then there's a tiny subplot of romance, which you guys know I always love. I feel like this is one of those books that I would just recommend to everyone because there's just nothing wrong with this book. And like the themes are great. It's fun. It makes you happy at the end. But because it's so short, I feel like you can't get that attached to the characters, even though you definitely do in a short amount of time. So I think I'm gonna give this 4.5 stars, which is insanely high. Like, highly recommend. So should these books be popular? Absolutely yes. We had all 4 stars and above in this video, which is insane. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys somewhere else on the internet. Bye!